Hello friends, welcome back to Marketing Basics. Today we are going to, today is the module 5 and we are going to understand or rather continue uh, the techniques to understand consumer needs. And friends, this is the most important topic, I would say, for any marketer or any business person who is wanting to sell their product services to a consumer or a customer. So therefore, I would like you to really pay attention, and this will be a little longer, but I will try to still be as brief as possible. And this is not the last module on consumer needs, because this is a vast subject. In fact, I had a hell of a time to try and keep it brief, because this subject is so vast. So we are going to have another module where we are going to continue the techniques of understanding consumer needs further. So what did we learn so far? So far what we learned in the last module is that what is a need? And what we understood is that need is a problem or an aspiration that a consumer seeks to solve or achieve in his life. And needs can be classified in two ways. Either we can classify, I think not either, or rather, the first way of classifying need is to look at what role does your product category and therefore your brand can play in a consumer's life. And when we say role that products or brands play in a consumer's life, primarily mean that what kind of functional, emotional, or a spiritual need you are satisfying in the consumer's life through your product or your service. Once you have understood this, then you can look into competition vis-a-vis the needs that you have charted, and you can compare that, okay, which of those needs are possibly not fulfilled very well, and therefore you can actually classify the needs on the basis of the fulfillment level. Because at the end of the day, if you have to compete, you have to solve a need which is ideally unmet or partially met, because if you can solve a need which is not fully met or partially met, you will have a greater chance of success, versus if you go and compete through a product or a service which is offering the same need which already other competitors are meeting. So that's really, the way to look at needs and their classification. So now we're going to learn that how do we really go about uncovering these needs as we are talking about. So let's learn how to uncover needs. So first thing every marketer needs to remember, and this is really the big mantra that you need to remember in all your life, because most of the time we tend to forget once we become a little experienced in the field of marketing. And the fact that we need to remember is that consumer is an individual, and his core reason in life is to live his life the best way he can. So his core reason for existence is not to buy our products, especially not to buy our brands. So product categories or brands need to fit into his life to make his life better. So therefore the consumer is a simple individual, and he has only one objective or aspiration in life, is to really better his quality of life. You as a product, you as a brand, need to understand that aspiration, need to understand those problems that he is facing, and you need to contribute to make his life better. If that is the role that you continue to play, and that is the intent that you have as a brand, only then you are going to really continuously be successful. But if you believe that the consumer is sitting there to buy your brand, and all you need to do is just go and place one product with a brand name on it and put some damn advertising on television, I can tell you 100% it's not going to work. And unfortunately, most of the time, that is what many experienced marketeers do. And therefore, as I said, that the brand's job is to solve a problem and improve the quality of life of your consumer. And the only way to discover your consumer or customer's need is to understand their life and things that influence them. And isn't it true, right? I mean, we are all consumers, and if you just look back, uh, when things influence us, whatever influences our life really determines our behavior. And therefore, uh, if we want to understand consumer needs, if we want to understand our customers need, we need to understand what is influencing our consumer's life or our customer's life, because then only we'll be able to identify the need and solve it. So the first rule in trying to uncovering consumer needs or customer needs is to look at the Pastel influence. So what is really Pastel? Let's look into it. I'm sure many of you know already, but there may be some who may not know. So Pastel is actually nothing but these are the macro factors influencing our lives, right? And these macro factors are stuff like political aspects, political factors, economical factors, social factors, technological factors, environmental factors, legal factors. Now, all of these influences our lives. So, for example, uh, technological factor, we know that the world is going digital, and brands or which are coming from a very traditional background, if they do not evolve as the technology is evolving, very clearly you will become less relevant to your consumer or your customer. So many times, or rather, uh, most of the times, there are various of this political, economical, social, technological, environmental and legal factors that influences our lives. And if, as marketeers, we are sharp enough to always identify them, understand how it is influencing the consumer's life or the customer's life, and then see that whether our product or brand is really evolving accordingly and somewhere, satisfying those problems or the needs that is emerging because of these Pastel factors, so, we can actually become relevant to our consumers. So let's look at some examples to really understand this better. So the biggest and the most recent example is really COVID-19. And for last 2.5 years, as COVID is continuing, we know that how hygiene has become very important to our lives. So this is really, I would say, an environmental factor that is impacting our lives, where there is this virus in the environment. We are all becoming wary of it. We don't want to get caught by it. And hence now, for last 2.5 years, suddenly consumers are more interested to understand that how hygienic you are, rather than just be concerned about what is your menu. So therefore, no contact delivery, signboards outside restaurants, that the dining is contactless. I mean, stuff like that was never thought of, right? These have come, these benefits rather have emerged only because of the COVID-19. And Pastel factors influence everyone. It is not just about a B2C category where it is influencing a consumer, but at the end of the day, a consumer or a customer, everybody is a human being and everybody has problems, everybody has aspirations, everybody gets influenced by some macro factor or the other. So here is an example even in B2B. So here is an example from paints. And we can see that during the COVID times, the painters, they were very badly hit because there was hardly any job. And during that time, there are brands which actually took up an initiative to help their customers. And this, I'm sure, will go a long way, because if you are helping your customers when they are in the need, this definitely enhances the relevance of your brand, and they will remember you when the times are better. So indirectly, it is going to help the brand's relevance consideration in their target audience. Like in this case, we're talking about this brand which took up this initiative for the painters. So while macro factors is one key uh, vector to identify how our consumers' life are being influenced, and therefore we can identify certain problems which are there in their life, and as brands, through our products, we can actually evolve, we can create some solutions which makes us relevant to our consumer set or our customer set. But there are many other ways to really uncover consumer needs. So the rule 2 is really this uh, uh, technique called 5W and 1H. So what is really 5W and 1H? Let's see. So 5W and 1H framework is really about who, what, where, why, when, and how. So, and this is all to do with the consumer's life. Who is your consumer? What does he do? Where does he live? Why does he need your product? When does he consume your product? How does he consume your product? If you understand all these aspects, you will understand your consumer better. So let's look at, what each one of these aspects really mean. In our initial modules, we already discussed about the aspect of who, right? That who is your consumer, which is what we discussed in detail about consumer segmentation, defining your target consumer. Because if you are not sharp enough about the segment that you're talking about, your benefits, your proposition will never be relevant, because it takes centuries for brands to become universally relevant. Something like Colgate is there today, but even Colgate, even after some 150, 200 years of existence, even today it is still sharp segmenting consumer segments and creating different specialized products for each consumer segment. So while Colgate dental cream may be relevant to a very wide universal audience, but it has happened because of its centuries of existence. But still, an old brand like that is focused on consumer segments as well. So for any new brand, for any not so mature brand, the starting point has to be who, which is who is your consumer. Once you have been able to define that, and we have already studied this, how to identify and build consumer segments, then you go about understanding the needs of the consumer, which is what we call as why. And why basically means understanding the consumer needs. Why do they need your product? Why do they need your category? And that is what is the starting point of understanding needs. And it's actually in a way very simple. I mean, sometimes you do not even need to go and meet a consumer. You can, if you don't have enough money to do market research, you can just put your brains and thoughts and you can just write down, and I can tell you that you yourself can figure out 5-10 reasons why any consumer would need your product. So that is the starting point, that why do they need your products. You then, if once you have a list of needs, you can ask the consumer and understand the importance of the needs. You can understand the satisfaction levels against those needs. You can understand how those needs are classified, because once you have understood the satisfaction level, once you have understood the importance of the needs, you can then classify them in terms of which needs are fully met, which needs are not fully met, or which needs are partially met. And and therefore you will have a good grasp over consumer needs. And along with this, if you also understand the consumer's life, because as I said that the raise the I mean, sorry, I'm not so good at French. So the reason for existence of brands is really to make a difference to the consumer's life. And therefore, whatever you're doing, you need to see that how your product's proposition is making a difference to the consumer's life. And hence it is very important to also understand that your target segment, what are their aspirations, what are their anxieties, because somewhere whatever you are offering need to either satisfy an aspiration or need to solve an anxiety. Because if you are able to do that, that is when brands become relevant to consumers, brands become stronger, and brands create a relationship with consumer. Otherwise it is always a very transactional relationship. So that is what, when we say why, that is what we mean by why. And then finally, once you have done all of these, this last piece we are going to discuss later on in our subsequent modules, that then we try and understand what, where, when, how. And this is really about understanding the decision making process of the consumer, that where do they buy, when do they buy, how do they buy, right? Because marketing mix is not just about understanding the needs. Marketing mix is also about executing each of your action in a way that makes you relevant to the consumer during this entire process of decision making. And this is a very interesting subject, but this we will come and take in subsequent modules, because right now we are all focused in the last 5 modules. We are right now focused on getting our basics right, because as a marketeer, if our basics are right, then only we will be able to go and execute our marketing mix. So as a player, just in sports, you need to first get trained before you are put into the ground to play. It's exactly like that as marketeers. First we need to have our basics very strong. So let's move ahead. So therefore, what is, these, I have tried to summarize what I just spoke, but these are some of the terms that you need to, as marketeers, you need to really understand and really inculcate in these terms in your mind, because these are the aspects which really helps you to understand the consumer needs better. So first is habits and practices. And habits and practices, we will discuss what do we really mean by habits and practices. But understanding habits and practices of your target consumer helps you to understand or discover some of the needs. Second is understanding the triggers to use the category. This is also called as category drivers, right? And what we mean by this is that why does a consumer really need your category? It's a simple question: need your product. And when I say your product, it does not mean the product that I don't mean your brand. I mean the product that you're making, that category, right? Why does it need? What is the trigger? Uh, Similarly, if there is a trigger, there are also consumers who may not be using the category, right? So let's say tissue paper. There may be some consumers who buy tissue paper regularly, but there may be some consumers who never buy tissue paper. So it is also important to understand that what are the barriers therefore to not use a particular category. So if you are a marketeer and you are selling a particular product category, you need to meet the users to understand the triggers. You also need to meet the non-users to understand the barriers. Then we come down to understanding the lapsers, because in every product category you will always find that there might be some consumers who were using the category some time back, but now they are not using it anymore. And it's very important to understand them, because this gives you the areas of dissatisfaction, because there must be something that they have not liked or something that did not meet their expectations, because of which they really went out of the category. Once we have understood, triggers, barriers, and the reasons for lapsing, and therefore we have understood various needs that this category could fulfill, right? Because trigger is a need, barriers are also can become a need, because therefore it means that you need to satisfy those needs, and it can actually, those barriers can then convert to be converted into triggers. Lapsing also means that there are certain needs which are not, which the consumer was expecting, but currently the product category is not delivering them. So therefore, once you have got a list of your needs, then you can ask the consumer and understand the hierarchy of needs, which is because every need cannot be the most important for the consumer. So when you force a consumer or a customer to prioritize the needs according to them, you will find a hierarchy of needs, and then you understand the level of satisfaction against those needs. And once you have done all of these, you will really have a good grasp over the consumer need understanding. And then parallelly, you need to understand the aspirations and anxieties of the consumers in their life. So let's move ahead. So let's start with habits and practices. So what do we really mean by habits and practices? It's very simple. Habits and practices, by the name, means that it is about understanding the consumer habits and understand how they go about using the product category. So it basically means that, okay, for any specific purpose, what kind of product do you really use? So if it is about body cleansing, simply we need to understand that what are the different kind of products that the consumer uses for body cleansing. Is it soap? Is it body wash? Is it just water? Is it mud? Is it anything else? Is it a scrubber? What is it that the consumer really uses for body cleansing? And this gives you a perspective that, okay, if you are a soap buyer, what are the various things that if you are a soap manufacturer, then what is that product category? Is it just soap? Is it body wash? Is it scrub? Is it also multani mitti? What, you can at least define your competitive set. Once you've understood what are the products being used, you can understand that how the consumer goes about using the product, right? Who uses it in the household? Where do they use it? How do they go about use it? In what form do they use it? How often do they use it? What is the frequency of usage? Every time when they're using, how much quantity they are really using, right? And each one of these actually helps you develop the right product. Okay, and many a times when you go into these understanding, you can also identify a certain innovative idea which can help you solve a consumer problem, right? Then the process, I mean, what is the steps involved? How do they go about using the product? Do they, when it is soap, how do they really pick up the soap? Is their eyes closed or their eyes are open? How do they feel that where in the body they apply the soap first? How do they feel when they are applying? How do they know that it is working, it is not working? Now each one of these many a times can help you come up with newer ideas. Where do they store the product, right? I mean, a simple idea about that the soap is always in a bathroom, it is exposed to water, it can get wet, and therefore it can lose its shape. Is there an idea over there that you come up with a soap which come up with a soap case along with the soap, so that the consumer can just put it inside that, and therefore a soap case becomes a consumer offer idea, and that becomes a primary packaging rather than just soap in a wrapper. Now, these are simple observations, but sometimes it can actually create new ideas. Purchase details. I mean, what is the frequency of purchase? Where do they purchase the product from? What are the pack sizes they purchase every time when they're buying? How many number of packs they are buying? I mean, somewhere maybe, this is how, and I'm sticking to the example of soap so that, each one of these aspects that we just spoke about in habits and practices, we can relate to it, right? So, I mean, I'm sure at some point of time, some smart marketer might have actually observed that, consumers actually end up buying, they don't buy one soap. I mean, soap is being bought for a household, and it is being used by so many people. So typically we buy 4 or 5 soaps, and that's how over a period of time the primary SKU in soap is no more a single pack, it is a pack of 3, pack of 4, because suddenly that has become relevant. But the brand which would have started it first would have got the biggest bang for the buck. Of course, now it has become table stakes, right? So therefore, these are the aspects when we talk about habits and practices. And if we understand this, many a times we can come up with interesting ideas. And let's see some of those ideas through an example. So recently, we saw some of the brands actually came with an add-on brush with a face wash. And it may be that somebody really observed that face washes are typically poured on hand. They are rubbed deeply on the face for lathering and deep cleaning. So therefore, the aspect of face wash being rubbed on the skin maybe is very important for the consumer, because the consumer wants that face wash to really go into the skin pores and clean the face well. So therefore, some bright marketer came up with this thought of creating a brush, because when you are applying that brush on your face, it is not just easing the foaming process, but it is also reinforcing in your mind as a consumer that this face wash is really deep cleansing my skin pores. And that is a brilliant idea, and some brands came up with this thought, and I'm sure they would have reaped the benefit. Similarly, a deodorant, uh, some marketeers must have observed that deodorants are used out of home by students as well as by working men. They carry it in their bags, and then they go and keep it in drawers. So somewhere, while if this is the practice that many young boys and men do, then how about creating a pack which you don't need, which you don't need to carry discreetly. It just easily fits into your pocket because there is so much of out of home usage of deodorant. So that's how came the idea of pocket deodorant. So the more we understand the consumer habits, the more we understand the consumer practices, the better we will be equipped to come up with thoughts and ideas to solve a particular consumer need. The second, and this is by far, according to me, trigger barrier lapsing is the most important piece any marketer in any product category, B2B, B2C, must understand, because if you know this, then you will be having a good handle on your consumer understanding for your particular category. So really, as we spoke, what is trigger? Trigger is very simply, why do you use the product? Why do you use the product category? And once you start asking the question to the consumer, you will not just understand the functional reasons for using the category, but if you keep asking why, you will also understand the emotional reason why the consumer uses the category. Because it is very important to uncover the functional need, but it is also important to uncover the emotional need, which is always related to the functional need, by the way, right? Because only when a product works functionally in a certain way, it makes you feel in a certain way. So therefore, functional needs and emotional needs are related to each other. And along with that, when you understand trigger, you must also understand what we call as attributes, because there are features, the product features also take to reinforce and make the consumer believe that the functional benefit that the consumer is seeking from that category is really being delivered. So I will give you some examples for you to understand that better. But before I go to the example of functional need, emotional need, and attributes, I just want to spend 5 seconds on how to tap into emotional benefit. And as I said, is that the technique is very simple. Sometimes we believe that marketing is very complex. I can tell you marketing is not complex. Marketing is simple, provided you are having the intent to talk to a consumer. So therefore, you have to be a good communicator to be able to have a, almost a conversation out of the blue with the consumer. Because if you are having that intent and having that attitude, only then you will be able to have good consumer understanding. Sitting in an AC room and trying to think in your own way sometimes may come up with good ideas, but many a times you will come up with ideas which are not really relevant. So therefore, how do you really tap into emotional benefits? Simply keep asking why. But what do you really ask? So just an example I'm giving, that let's say you want to ask, you want to understand the emotional benefit and the functional benefit to do with shirts. And let's say it is a white shirt. So a simple question, that why do you buy a white shirt? Every stimulus has an output. So if this is the input question, you will get to know that various reasons why consumers may buy a white shirt. Maybe, some people feel it is a professional attire. Some people may feel that it is important for very important meetings. Some people may feel that it is actually the best suited color for the summer season, because generally white does not absorb any color, right? So therefore, it's actually a good color for summer season. And some people who have a skin type which is very sweaty, for them it is even better, because in a very dark colored cloth, you may sweat even more. Plus, it might see through much more. Whereas in a white shirt, actually it might make you feel a little bit more cold, little compared to a very dark colored shirt. So for a specific skin type also, maybe this is important. But when we understand the functional benefit, okay, these are the functional benefits, the next question I can ask the consumer that, okay, you said that it that it makes you uh, it is a professional attire. Can you please tell what does it make you feel? Okay, when you wear a white shirt, what does it make you feel? Okay, when you say that it is a professional attire, so if you wear a professional attire, what does it make you feel? And when you ask this question, simple question, what does it make you feel, you will get responses from the consumer which we can classify as emotional benefit, because emotion is nothing but it is about feeling. It is about what it's not the rational reason for doing something, it is now the emotional reason for doing something, which is how does your mind feel, how does your heart feels, right? So therefore you will surely get responses something like this, that it makes me feel sophisticated, it makes me feel ready for the occasion, it makes me feel that it my that I look more mature, or it can be as simply that it just makes me feel more happy and more confident. The color itself has that magic. So when you understand the both the functional and the emotion behind that, then you can uh, figure out that which need you want to focus more, because and that you will be able to figure out when you compare this, that okay, what is competition doing? Because if competition is fully focused on functionality, then you also go and talk about the same functionality may not work. But if you go and talk about the emotional benefit, that in your communication, maybe it will connect with the consumer, because no other brand is really doing that. So this is a technique to really, once you understand the functional reasons, the emotional reasons, you then compare that, okay, what is competition doing? Then you will be able to get some gaps, some spaces where you can really play. So let's move ahead and look at the examples of a functional benefit, emotional benefit, and attribute, right? So here is, and I'm going to, because we have already spent around 33 minutes, and I know that videos need to be, as crisp as possible, because many of us lose interest. So I do not want to go through all of them, but let me go through one example, right? So one of, so basically, if we look at deodorant as a category, it may play different roles for different consumers. So the trigger could be that I want a deodorant because I want a long lasting fragrance. So that's the simple benefit that I'm seeking. But when you ask the consumer, okay, if the fragrance is long lasting, what does it make you feel? So maybe the consumer will say that it makes me feel confident, because I know that the fragrance is working throughout, so I can be confident, I can walk anywhere without really having back of my mind that whether I'm smelling good or not. Now the question comes that, okay, but how do you really know that your fragrance is working? How do you know when you're buying a product that this will be a long lasting fragrance? Because unless you have tried it, you don't know. So how do you know this? So that is when comes, that you will get to know from consumers that what is the proof of that performance. So sometimes, in this case it will be the fragrance strength, because when you're buying the deo in the outlet, the strength of the fragrance will tell your mind that this may be long lasting, right? Or maybe it is the format that, if it is a full liquid deodorant, maybe you will feel that, that this is exactly like a perfume as it comes in a bottle, hence it will be more long lasting, because it will stick to my skin, versus a aerosol format which will blow up in the air, or get dissipated in the air. Blow up is not the right word. And sometimes it is just the packaging, the kind of packaging, dark colors, tend to tell you that tend to make you feel that the fragrances inside this are also going to be stronger, and a light colored pack doesn't cue that. So therefore you need to, once you understand that these attributes, then you have the full understanding. Because when you're creating a product, it is not just about communication, it is also about creating the product. And whatever is your proposition, if you understand that, okay, if this is the proposition, what attributes in my product reinforces that proposition, then you will focus on that, right? And you will create the right product, and it will become successful. So hence it is very important to understand the functional benefits, the emotional benefits, and also the attributes that your product needs to have to reinforce that functional benefit. Okay. And a good example of this is fog here. The third aspect is understanding barriers. So what do we really mean by barriers? It is very simply, barriers is all about the reasons which keeps a consumer away from using a product. So you just need to ask a consumer why you do not use a product, and you will get to know the reasons which we can call as barriers. And this is very important, especially for categories which are not highly penetrated, because penetration happens once you continue to understand what are the barriers, and as you keep removing those barriers, the category penetration keeps increasing. So let's look at some examples. Very simple example, oats. One of the big barriers was that there was a perception that oats are not tasty, and Indian consumers like to eat tasty food. So and that's how Saffola came up with masala oats, and they understood this barrier, they removed this barrier through a product, and bingo, it was a success. Similarly, hair color. Many consumers don't use hair color because they believe that they will lose hair, so there is a concern of safety. That's how came ammonia free hair color. Or a e-commerce. Many consumers were wary that they may lose their money if they pay online, because they pay online, and if it doesn't come, the product doesn't come home, then who will they chase? So that's how came the big innovation by Flipkart, which made them so big, cash on delivery. And today every e-commerce platform is having cash on delivery, just to remove that barrier. So these examples were to make you understand that how, if you know the barriers and remove the barriers, it helps to grow the category's penetration and makes your brand relevant as a result. Finally, lapses. So how do you understand lapsing? Simple. Go and reach out to consumers who are using a product category at one point of time, but now they are no more using it. So understand those reasons why those consumers lapsed out of a particular product category, and hence you will get to know the areas of dissatisfaction, because if you know those areas of dissatisfaction and you solve them, you become relevant to consumers. So again, let me give you some examples. So let's say e-commerce again. One of the reasons for lapsing, the many people initially bought clothes, but then it was not matching. So what do you do? Of course, one was return policy got introduced. So therefore, that particular reason for lapsing or area of dissatisfaction got overcome. But also now brands have come up with tech ideas like virtual reality, where before you buy on the e-commerce platform itself, you can actually check how it will look, whether it will fit on your body type or not, and therefore you are ensuring that the area of dissatisfaction that was making some consumers coming into your category but lapsing out of it, you are taking care of that. Similarly, hair oil. Many youngsters lapse out of hair oil because it was sticky. So that's how came the idea of oil replacement in the developed markets, but even in developing countries, the entire concept of light hair oil came from there. Similarly, in case of hair styling, absolute teens, they use a lot of wax and a lot of gels, but as you start growing in age, many youngsters really fall out of the category, simply because that suddenly now they become more conscious about hair and they have a fear of hair loss. So that's how came the category of hair cream, which satisfied that particular problem and became relevant. And similarly, there are many examples, but we will go quickly because we have to cover a lot. Finally, once we have understood and made this list, we can then make a need hierarchy. We can ask consumers to classify the needs in order of priority, and hence we will be able to classify the needs into primary needs and secondary needs. We'll see some examples of that as well. So here is an example of shampoo, where once you where the parameters which are highlighted here, those are the parameters which have got the which we can classify as primary needs, because those are the most important needs which as consumers they believe that the shampoo category plays in their life, which is it makes their hair shiny, it cleanses the hair, it strengthens hair, it prevents hair breakage, it makes the hair look beautiful, it makes the hair soft and smooth. So these are the therefore the needs which are the primary needs. And then we also have some secondary needs, that it needs to have good smell, good fragrance, but those are secondary needs. The primary needs are these, and as long as if your brand is not delivering on those primary needs, your product is not delivering on those primary needs, then you will have a problem as a brand. Uh, Similarly, in case of soap, let's say men's soap, the primary needs, the most important needs are hygiene, fresh and energy, deep clean, whereas the secondary needs is cooling, smell and whitening. So now it depends upon, how mature is the category, whether the category penetration is very high. Many a times in a very, very highly penetrated category, brand starts focusing on the secondary needs because the primary needs are already taken. Many brands are there, and then you come up with secondary needs. So we have seen recently there are brands like Wildstone, for example, which position themselves only on the power of fragrance, that a soap that smells so well that it makes you feel sexy. So sometimes even secondary needs can become a positioning plank for brands. But it is very important to understand the need hierarchy, because if you know the need hierarchy, then you can really craft your positioning better. And as I said, how do you really discover all of these? It's very simple. I am constantly saying you need to have conversation with your consumer. You need to have conversation with your customer. So of course, if you have money, you conduct market research. If you don't have money, you go out yourself and do it. But you need to do it, because without doing this, you will never have conviction as a marketer. And as I already said, that how do you really go about understanding this? Whom do you really meet? I already spoke about it, that to understand trigger, you need to meet users. Okay. And once you have met users, you not only get to know the triggers, you also get to uh, prioritize the needs and therefore chart the need hierarchy. To understand the barriers, you need to meet the non-users, and to understand the reasons for lapsing, you need to meet the lapsers. It's very simple. So you need to meet distinct segments even within your category, and then you will be able to really chart out the trigger, barrier and reasons for lapsing, and also the need hierarchy. And there are many methods. I think a lot of these things that I spoke about, it has specific ways and means of doing it in terms of market research, but this is a subject in itself which I will take subsequently in my other modules. At this point of time, we are just understanding the basics, but again I can tell you that while there may be very, very complex research models, it can be as simple as just going out and meeting consumers. But you need to be sure that which consumer are you meeting, because you need to be sure about your consumer segment. And as I said, and as I always keep saying, the concepts of marketing is not limited to B2C. It is as applicable as to B2B segments as well. I am anyways going to upload this presentation on LinkedIn so you can have a detailed look at it. But I have tried to give an example of a B2C category and a corresponding B2B category, and try to give you an example that how this concept of trigger, barrier, and lapsing can be relevant for a B2B marketer also. And finally, when you've done all of this, you need to do two activities. Activity number one, that ask your customer, ask your consumer to do a ranking of all the competition vis-a-vis these needs on the order of priority. Because when you do that, you will get to know that which competition is strong, is perceived to be strong on which need, and which competition is perceived to be weak on which need. And therefore, when you have done this, you will actually understand that if there is a gap or not, right? Similarly, you also need to ask your consumer or your customer their satisfaction levels on each need, because when you do that, again, this will also help you to classify, okay, that which are those needs which are important but fully met, and some needs may be important but not fully met. So you will be able to understand the partially met needs from this, and combining the first and the second, which is looking at the perception of competition against the needs as per the consumer or the customer, and looking at the satisfaction level by the consumer or the customer against those needs. When you combine the two, you will get to have a sense that is there a gap in the market, and then you can really kind of plot it. One axis is the level of importance of the needs, so we discussed about need hierarchy. The other is about the satisfaction level against those needs. We already discussed about it, and therefore you will be able to classify the needs as certain needs which are nice to have because they are already, they may be, they are not so important, so even if you have them, it's not going to create enough value for the consumer or the customer. Some needs which are hygiene factor, which means that they are very high on importance, but guess what, all brands are giving them, satisfying them. So therefore you also need to have it. Not having it is a problem, but you need to have it. But by having them, it will not give you a differentiation or a or a right to succeed. So therefore the most important area that you need to focus on is this area, which we call as the critical need gap, which is high on importance but satisfaction levels being low. So really, when you understand the needs well, do the, from a consumer standpoint, do the comparison of satisfaction levels, etc., then you will be in a position to really kind of fill this chart. Finally, as I said before, that while one aspect is to understand the needs from a category standpoint, the other aspect is to understand the human being, because ultimately you are dealing with a human being, and you need to understand the anxiety and aspirations of that human being. Again, possibly at some point of time I'll give you an example from a B2B category also, but I can tell you that this is as important in B2B as it is important in B2C, because everywhere ultimately we are dealing with human beings, right? So therefore, and when you understand the anxiety and aspirations of your consumer, then you can fix that, okay, which anxiety or which aspiration my product can play a role in satisfying them or solving them. Because when you make that connect, then your brand becomes strong, right? And again, as I said, you just need to have conversation with consumers to understand their anxieties and understand their aspiration. And believe me, when you have a conversation, you will get to hear from them. Okay. So I'm going to skip this slide. This is an example how to have the conversation. You can look into my LinkedIn presentation and you will be able to understand this. It's not rocket science. But I just wanted to give you examples of that, how when brands really connect with life's anxiety or aspiration, they become very powerful. So here are three examples. Fast Track. As a brand, all it did is that it understood that teens and youth, they always believed they wanted to be rebellious, but the society was not allowing them. So through the brand, they legitimized the rebellious attitude of the teens and youth, and that's how they connected. All of us know about Nike. The statement "just do it" means nothing, but it just invokes the winning spirit in all of us, and that is a big anxiety that a lot of us have, that where do I get that energy, where do I get the spirit uh, to win. And women, Dove connected with women when they spoke about uh, just being comfortable in themselves, in their own skin, and not being objectified, and it inspired millions of women, and that's how the brand became so successful. So I wanted to give you this example so that you understand the power of understanding the anxiety and aspirations of your consumer's life, and then try and see that how your brand fits into their scheme of things. Because if you do that connection, that is when you will be really successful as a brand. Otherwise, many brands are successful otherwise also, but you will remain transactional. So summarizing what we learned today, very simply, To understand consumer needs, you need to understand these three buckets. One is trigger, barrier, and lapsing, which I am calling as areas of dissatisfaction. Classify the functional and emotional needs. We discussed how you can do it, how you can go about it. And finally, understand that human being. Understand his anxieties or her anxieties, understand his or her aspirations. Once you have done all of these, that is when you can build an hypothesis. And you can just write it in a piece of paper, which we call as a concept. Okay. Now a lot of marketing is so vast, my friends, that each one of these I cannot subsume in one module. We will have multiple modules where we will also understand how to write the positioning, how to write a concept, how to because these are stimulus which you need to take to your consumers. But even if you don't know it, even if you're a novice, you can still write an hypothesis if you know some of these aspects about your consumers needs and their lives. You write your hypothesis, and then you take your hypothesis to your consumer. And when I say consumer, you need to be clear which consumer. You take it to that consumer segment, show that this is an idea that I have, ask that whether they like it or they don't like it, or they think that there is an improvement that is needed. If the customer rejects your initial hypothesis, don't get bogged down, because all you need ask the consumer that why they rejected it, because when you ask them, they will tell you that what were the lacunae in it, how it can be improved, and this gives you the stimulus to build another hypothesis. Again, go through the same process till you find that no, now my hypothesis seems to be working. And I can tell you that if you go through this process, ultimately you will get a concept, you will get an idea which consumers will start liking. And once you have done that, then finally develop the solution. Solution is a product, solution is a communication, solution is primarily these two things, which is that your brand, how your product is, what is your product's concept, what is the benefit of your product, what is the emotional benefit of your product, what are the attributes of your product, and you can translate the same in the form of communication as well. So that is, to summarize, this is what in this module we understood, which is about understanding consumer needs and the techniques to understand consumer needs. In the next module, we are going to further continue this conversation, because many a times as marketeers, you will also find in many categories where you will hit a wall, because discovering needs is not easy. Category like soap, it is very difficult because brands have been doing it for centuries. So then how do you go about it? And there are techniques which can sometimes help you to even come up with disruptive ideas in the most difficult category. So we will discuss this in my next module, which is the module 6. Till then, thank you so much. It has been a 50+ minutes video, but I can tell you that I have tried to be as fast as possible. But I can tell you that this is vast subject, but all I am trying to do is to play my role in ensuring that your basics are in the right place. I am sure that you will go and read more and strengthen your understanding even more. Till that time, if you have any queries, this is my phone number. Here is my email ID, or you can find me on LinkedIn. You can send me any queries that you have. Till then, thank you so much. All of you, in whichever part of the world you are, you have a good day or good night. See you till my next module. Thank you so much.